Hey guys! Tonight we're diving into some of the most powerful and life-changing ideas philosophy has to offer. These aren't just random thoughts. They're the kind of concepts that can completely shift how you see life, yourself, and the world around you. Let's get into it. Memento Mori. Memento Mori means remember that you will die. Not someday, not eventually, but for real. You will die. And that truth isn't meant to scare you. It's meant to focus you. It's meant to take a hammer to your procrastination and your fake confidence and your endless waiting. You scroll, you compare, you put off the things that actually matter. But deep down, you know the truth. That this won't last. That one day, your name will be said for the last time. So let me ask you something. What are you really doing with your time? What are you building? Who are you becoming? What would change if you lived every day with death sitting quietly on your shoulder, reminding you that the clock is ticking whether you look at it or not? The Romans knew. That's why they whispered Memento Mori into the ears of powerful men during their greatest triumphs. To remind them that no matter how high you rise, you're still a breath away from the grave. And yet today, we run from it. We cover it up. We act like we're invincible. We drown ourselves in distractions, in numbers, in validation. But all of that fades. All of it turns to dust. Memento Mori isn't a warning. It's a gift. Because when you finally accept that your time is limited, you start living like it's yours. You stop waiting for the perfect mood or the perfect plan. You stop chasing other people's approval. You start to speak the truth. You start to move with intention. You start to see that everything around you is temporary, and that's what makes it beautiful. The sun hitting your skin, the sound of your mum's voice, the quiet moment right before you fall asleep. None of it lasts, and that's why it matters. So I'll ask again, if you died a year from now, would you be proud of how you're spending today? If the clock ran out this week, would you have anything real to leave behind? You say you want to be great. You say you want peace. You say you want meaning. Then act like it. Stop pretending you have forever. Stop waiting. Start now. Speak up. Love harder. Move with purpose. Because no matter who you are, no matter how strong, how smart, how fast or careful you think you are, your time is running out. And once it's gone, you don't get a second shot. You don't get to undo the days you wasted. Memento Mori is a blade to cut through the noise. It's a fire under your feet. It's not there to hurt you. It's there to wake you up. Because this moment, right now, might be all you ever get. Will to live. The will to live is one of the most terrifyingly powerful forces in the human mind. It's not just instinct. It's not just biology. It's something deeper, something primal that doesn't care about logic, pride, or dignity. It's the reason people crawl out of burning buildings with shattered legs. It's the reason someone starving, freezing, alone, still keeps breathing. It's why people survive car crashes, plane crashes, cancer, war. Not because they had a plan, not because they had strength, but because something in them refused to stop. So let me ask you, what would you do if life ripped everything from you? If your body was broken, your mind was tired, and hope felt like a memory, would you still fight? Would you still try? You think you know yourself, but you don't know who you are until you're hanging off the edge with nothing to hold on to but raw will. The will to live doesn't care about comfort. It doesn't need motivation. It doesn't ask for permission. It kicks in when everything else gives up. And it's in you, whether you feel it or not. People have survived months alone at sea, days buried under rubble, years in prison cells with nothing but a wall and a heartbeat. How? Because something in them said not yet. Not like this. Not here. The will to live can make cowards brave. It can make broken people crawl through fire. It doesn't wait for ideal conditions. It doesn't need a reason. Sometimes it's just a scream in the dark that says, I'm not done. And maybe you felt it too. On your worst night, in your lowest moment, when you wanted everything to stop. But something inside you whispered, keep going. That wasn't luck. That wasn't weakness. That was the strongest part of you. So why do we act like we're fragile? Why do we waste days like they don't cost us everything? You have something in you that's unbreakable. You just haven't had to meet it yet. But it's there. And one day, life will push you to the edge, and you'll have to choose, collapse or climb, break or bend, quit or survive. And when that moment comes, remember this: the will to live doesn't need answers. It just needs a reason. And sometimes the reason is as small as a memory, a name, a promise you made, a future you haven't reached yet. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to feel ready. You just need to decide, are you still breathing? Then it's not over. So stand up, clench your teeth, and walk forward like the fire's already behind you. Because the will to live is not about surviving, it's about refusing to disappear. Plato's paradox. Plato's paradox asks a question that seems innocent on the surface, but breaks everything we think we know about knowledge. How can you search for something if you don't even know what it is? And if you already know what it is, then why are you even searching? It traps you in a loop where either you're blind with no way forward, or you're already there and the journey is meaningless. Imagine trying to find a color you've never seen, or trying to chase a sound you can't describe. How would you ever know you found it? What would it feel like to reach something if you don't know what you're reaching for? Plato didn't ask this to confuse people. He asked it to expose something deeper, something ancient. He believed that all learning is remembering, that your soul existed before this life, that it saw the truth, knew the forms, touched the eternal, and that when you were born into a body, you forgot it all. You fell into amnesia. And now what you call learning, those little moments of clarity, of insight, of revelation, isn't new information. It's memory coming back. That flash of recognition when a truth hits you deep. That strange feeling when a concept makes too much sense, too fast. That isn't discovery, it's recollection. Plato called it anamnesis, the soul remembering what the body forgot. And if that's true, then the real question becomes, what else have you forgotten? What wisdom is already inside you, hidden beneath distraction and fear and noise? If you were born with the blueprint for truth buried in your mind, how much of your life is just trying to wake it back up? Think about how often you're searching, meaning, purpose, answers, clarity. What if the search isn't about finding something new, but about uncovering what's already there? Plato's paradox forces you to rethink the entire structure of knowledge. It says the truth doesn't live out there, it lives in here, in you, and you already knew it once. So what happened? What silenced it? What made you forget? Was it fear? Was it comfort? Was it the world telling you that answers come from authority, from books, from experts, instead of your own mind? Because maybe the greatest tragedy isn't not knowing, it's forgetting what you once knew. And maybe the point of philosophy, of reflection, of life itself, isn't to collect answers, but to remember who you were before the world made you forget. So the next time you sit in silence, asking the hard questions, doubting yourself, feeling lost, remember this paradox. Remember that buried beneath the confusion, there might already be a voice inside you with the answers. Not because you just figured it out, but because your soul has known all along. Abjection. Abjection is the feeling that creeps in when something crosses the boundary between what we are and what we refuse to be. It's not simple disgust, it's deeper. It's when your body reacts before your mind understands. When something repels you so intensely, it feels like your own self is under attack. Think of the smell of rot, the sight of blood outside the body, the moment when something human turns unfamiliar. Abjection lives in that space, that twitch of horror when you realize the thing in front of you was once alive, or maybe still is. Julia Kristeva, the philosopher who gave abjection its name, said it's the moment you see the collapse of meaning. The moment where the categories we build, clean and dirty, self and other, human and animal, suddenly blur. It's why corpses disturb us, not just because of death, but because they look like us. And yet, they're not. They used to be like us, but now they're the thing we fear becoming. Abjection shows up in our most primal reactions. When we see something that reminds us of our own vulnerability, our own decay, our own fragility. It's the feeling you get when you vomit. When your body expels something violently, you don't just feel sick, you feel like the border between inside and outside has been violated, that you're no longer fully in control, and that's terrifying. Because abjection reminds you that your body is not a fortress, that you are not untouchable. You are made of flesh and fluids and weaknesses you'd rather forget. It's why certain things make you recoil, not because they're evil, but because they hit too close to home. They mirror parts of yourself you don't want to face. The wound, the dirt, the breakdown, the truth. Abjection is why we exile, why we shame, why we build walls between us and them. It's why societies label people as unclean, impure, dangerous, not because they truly are, but because they represent something that threatens our illusion of control. They remind us of what we try to bury: illness, madness, death. And once you understand that, you start to see abjection everywhere. In horror movies, in politics, in the way people react to bodies that don't fit the mold. It's not about logic, it's about fear. The fear that what we've cast out might still be inside us, that we're not as pure, as normal, as separate as we pretend to be. Abjection isn't about the other. It's about the part of you that you cannot accept. So next time you feel that chill crawl up your spine, when something makes your stomach turn for reasons you can't explain, ask yourself, what line did it cross? What part of yourself did it wake up? Because abjection doesn't just show you what you fear, it shows you what you are beneath the surface, beneath the mask, beneath the walls. It reminds you that the monster out there might already be inside. Antinatalism. Antinatalism is the belief that bringing a new life into this world is not a gift, but a harm. That to be born is not a blessing, it's a sentence. It challenges one of the deepest assumptions we have as humans, that life is inherently good, that existence is better than non-existence. But antinatalists flip that completely. They ask, if you knew the pain, the suffering, the heartbreak, the anxiety, the decay, and the death waiting at the end of every life, would you still choose to create it? Would you still bring someone into a world where suffering isn't a possibility? It's a guarantee. Think about it. Every person you know will die. Every child will one day feel fear, get sick, cry themselves to sleep, lose the people they love. And none of them ask to be here. They were born into a system they didn't choose, a body they didn't design, a world full of violence, randomness, and slow decay. Antinatalism says that to impose that on someone, no matter how good your intentions, might be one of the most selfish things you can do. Even if that person finds joy, that joy came at the cost of risk, of pain, of a roulette they never agreed to play. Philosophers like David Benatar argue that the absence of pain is good even if no one experiences it, but the absence of pleasure is not bad unless someone is deprived. And since someone who was never born can't miss joy, but is spared all suffering, then not being born is always the better outcome. It's unsettling. It goes against everything we're taught, that life is precious, that having children is beautiful, that existence itself is a miracle. But what if it's not? What if the only reason we believe that is because we're already trapped in it? Because once you're alive, the survival instinct kicks in. Once you're conscious, you're wired to want to keep going, no matter how much it hurts. So how can we ever judge life objectively when we're biologically programmed to cling to it? Antinatalism isn't about hating life. It's about compassion. It's about recognizing that life contains immense beauty. Yes, but that beauty is inseparable from pain. And some say it's not ethical to gamble with someone else's suffering just to satisfy our own desires for meaning, legacy, or love. Because the truth is, we don't bring people into paradise. We bring them into a world that kills everyone in the end. So the question Antinatalism asks is simple, brutal, and impossible to ignore. Was it ever right to create someone who will one day suffer just so they might also smile? And if you really love the person you could have created, would you have spared them from this place entirely? Silence of God. The silence of God is one of the most haunting experiences a person can face, not because it screams, but because it doesn't. It's the moment you fall to your knees, whispering prayers into the dark, and nothing answers. No sign, no voice, no feeling. Just silence. A silence so deep it starts to echo inside you. It doesn't matter if you were raised with faith or found it later. At some point, almost everyone faces that void. The moment where everything is falling apart and the sky stays quiet. And it's in that silence that the questions start to grow. Why didn't he stop it? Why didn't he save them? Why do the good suffer while the wicked rise? And if there is a God, why won't he speak? Some say this silence is a test, a way to strengthen your faith through absence. Others say it's proof there's nothing there at all. But neither answer quiets the ache, because silence isn't just the absence of sound, it's the absence of comfort, of presence, of meaning. In Scripture, even the most devoted felt it. Jesus on the cross cried out, "My God, why have you forsaken me?" Job lost everything and heard nothing. The prophets fasted and wept, only to be met with more stillness. This silence is not new, it is ancient. But that doesn't make it easier. It can feel like abandonment, like betrayal, like your soul is reaching out and being ignored. And yet, the silence can also do something else. It strips everything away, the rituals, the noise, the stories, until it's just you and whatever truth you still cling to. Maybe faith isn't about hearing God's voice. Maybe it's about choosing to speak, even when no one answers. Maybe belief means standing in the silence and still refusing to walk away. But how do you hold on to a God who won't speak back? How do you trust a presence you can't feel? And if God is real, why stay hidden when the world is burning? These are not questions that break faith. These are the questions that shape it. Because true faith isn't built on certainty. It's built in the silence, in the waiting, in the ache. The silence of God is not proof of absence, but it is a mirror, and it shows you what you really believe when there's no one left to impress, no comfort left to hold, no signs left to follow. Just you, and the silence. And the question that never fully goes away, are you still listening, even when heaven is quiet? No-self doctrine. The no-self doctrine is one of the most disturbing and liberating ideas to ever come out of human thought. At its core, it says the self, the I you think you are, is an illusion. Not just a misunderstanding, but a complete fabrication created by your mind to make sense of a constantly shifting experience. You aren't a fixed being. You aren't the same person from yesterday. You aren't even the same person from a moment ago. Every thought, every emotion, every memory you claim as yours is just a ripple in a stream that never stops moving. But you call it a self. You stitch it together with stories, habits, names, and expectations. You believe in this solid me at the center of your life. And yet, when you try to find it, really find it, there's nothing there. No core, no unchanging thing. Just thoughts thinking themselves, sensations rising and passing, consciousness observing, but never owning. That's what the Buddha saw. That's what the doctrine of anatta reveals. That the self is like a flame, a process, not a thing. Ever-changing, never still. And the moment you cling to it, it slips through your fingers. But if the self is an illusion, then what suffers? Who feels pain? Who loves? Who dies? The answer is terrifying. No one. Experience flows, but there's no owner of the pain, no eternal witness, just cause and effect, just patterns playing out. And yet somehow, that's not nihilism. It's freedom. Because if there's no fixed self, there's nothing to protect, nothing to defend, nothing to prove. You can let go of the heavy burden of me. You can stop building your identity like a fortress. You can stop fearing the loss of something that was never truly there. But don't mistake this for apathy. The no-self doctrine doesn't erase meaning. It transforms it. It says compassion matters more because there is no real separation. There is no solid line between you and the world. Every boundary is a lie your ego tells to stay alive. So ask yourself, have you ever truly seen yourself? Or have you only seen the thoughts that claim to be you? If you stop identifying with them, what's left? Silence, space, peace, or the terrifying beauty of being no one at all. The no-self doctrine doesn't want you to disappear. It wants you to wake up and realize you were never here to begin with. Mimetic desire. Mimetic desire is the idea that we don't want things because we truly desire them. We want them because someone else does. It means your wants, your goals, your dreams might not be yours at all. You saw someone else chase it, someone else admire it, and suddenly it became valuable to you. Not because of what it is, but because of who wants it. The theory comes from René Girard, who believed that human desire is not original, it's imitated. That we are not lone individuals crafting personal paths, but mirrors reflecting each other's longings. Think about it. A toy ignored by a child suddenly becomes precious when another child reaches for it. A person becomes attractive the moment someone else loves them. A job, a car, a lifestyle, all become desirable when someone with status already owns them. We don't chase objects. We chase the illusion of meaning created by others. And the deeper you go, the more disturbing it gets. Because if desire is mimetic, then we are constantly being shaped by the people around us. Our envy, our rivalry, our ambition, all reflections, all echoes, and this leads to conflict. Because when we all chase the same things for the same reasons, we become rivals. Not for survival, but for symbols. Symbols of value, power, attention. Mimetic desire creates tension, resentment, even violence. Not because of the object itself, but because of what the object represents in the eyes of others. And Girard believed that societies learn to deal with this by finding scapegoats, by blaming one person, one outsider, one target, and punishing them to release the built-up chaos of imitation. That's the real danger. Mimetic desire doesn't just shape individuals, it shapes culture, trends, war, and peace. So what does this mean for you? It means you might be living a life someone else chose for you. It means the things you sacrifice for might be things you never actually wanted. It means your pain might come not from failure, but from chasing someone else's dream. So ask yourself, who are you copying? Who taught you what success looks like? What love looks like? What happiness is supposed to be? If you stripped away every outside influence, every comparison, every idol, every rival, what would you still want? Would anything be left? Or would the silence reveal that most of your desire was never yours to begin with? Mimetic desire is not just a theory, it's a mirror. And when you look into it, you might see a stranger chasing shadows. The paradox of tragedy. The paradox of tragedy asks a question that cuts straight into the heart of what it means to be human. Why do we enjoy watching pain? Why do we sit in dark rooms and pay money to feel sorrow? Why do we seek out stories of death, betrayal, heartbreak, and loss, and call it entertainment? Tragedy is supposed to hurt. It shows us the worst things that can happen. Families torn apart, heroes destroyed, innocence broken, and yet we're drawn to it, again and again. We know it will crush us, and we still press play. We still turn the page. We still stare. But why? Why would we willingly step into suffering that isn't ours? Philosophers have wrestled with this question for centuries. Aristotle said it was catharsis, a cleansing, that by watching tragedy unfold, we release our own fear and pity, that we emerge lighter, purged, somehow stronger. But others say it's something deeper. That tragedy gives shape to our chaos, that in a world full of real pain, real confusion, real loss, tragedy gives us a container to hold it in. It makes the unbearable understandable. For a few moments, we see the cruelty of life played out with beauty, with order, with meaning. And even when the ending is dark, there's comfort in the clarity, in knowing that someone else has felt this too, that even pain can be art. But maybe the most haunting answer is this. Maybe we're drawn to tragedy because it lets us feel deeply, without the consequences. It lets us break down safely. We weep for characters because we can't weep for ourselves. We mourn their loss because it's easier than mourning our own. Tragedy becomes a mirror, but one step removed. A way to confront death, failure, abandonment, without the fear that it's happening to us. And somewhere in that distance, we heal. Or at least, we cope. But here's the paradox. If tragedy brings pleasure, is it still tragedy? If we find joy in sadness, does that twist what sadness is? We cry, and we like it. We ache, and we call it beautiful. So what does that say about us? Maybe it means that pain, when seen clearly, is not just destruction, it's transformation. Maybe tragedy doesn't break us. Maybe it remakes us. And maybe the reason we're drawn to the darkest stories is because they show us who we are when everything else is stripped away. Not just fragile, not just wounded, but human, completely, terrifyingly, beautifully human. Cogito, ergo sum. Cogito, ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. It sounds like confidence, like certainty, like the foundation of all knowledge boiled into 5 simple words. But this wasn't written out of pride. It was written out of fear. Descartes wasn't trying to sound wise. He was trying to survive a collapse. He wanted to find one thing that couldn't be ripped away by doubt, because everything else had already started to fall. The senses, unreliable. The body, could be a dream. The world, maybe it was never real to begin with. Even the mind itself, thoughts, emotions, memories, could all be part of some massive illusion, a trick, a lie. So what could he trust? Just one thing. That there is thinking. That thoughts are happening. And even if every single one of them is wrong, even if you're hallucinating, dreaming, trapped in a simulation, there still has to be something that's experiencing the illusion. Something asking the question. Something doubting. The thought itself proves the thinker. And in that moment, Descartes found the one thing he could not doubt. That he exists. Not as a body. Not as a name. Not as a person in a world. But as a thinking thing. A spark of awareness in the dark. And that's where it gets terrifying. Because if all you can be sure of is your own mind, then what is everything else? What is this world? These people? These rules? Memories? Sensations? Sounds? You say you feel them, but how do you know they're real? You say you see color, but what if it's part of the lie? You say you love, you hurt, you live, but if all of it can be faked, what's left? Cogito. Ergo sum isn't peaceful. It's lonely. It leaves you suspended in space, stripped of every certainty except for one. You are thinking. But what are you? Where are you? What else exists, if anything? It's not a declaration of strength. It's the whisper of someone who's lost everything except their ability to ask the question. And that's the true weight of it. That maybe the world isn't solid. Maybe truth isn't external, Maybe you will never escape the walls of your own mind, and the only thing you'll ever be able to cling to is the thought that you are. Nothing more, nothing less. You think. Therefore, you are. But what comes next? What are you supposed to do with a truth so small it fits in a whisper, yet so heavy it carries the weight of your entire existence? Utilitarianism. Utilitarianism is the idea that the right thing to do is whatever creates the greatest amount of happiness for the greatest number of people. On the surface, it sounds simple, logical, even kind. Why wouldn't we want to maximize well-being? Why wouldn't we choose the option that helps the most lives, eases the most pain, brings the most joy? That's what philosophers like Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill believed. That morality isn't about rules or tradition or religion. It's about consequences. It's about results. If your actions reduce suffering and increase happiness, then they're good. If they do the opposite, they're not. But the moment you try to apply it, utilitarianism becomes one of the most dangerous ideas in moral philosophy. Because it doesn't care about intention. It doesn't care about fairness. It doesn't care about the individual. It only cares about the sum, the math. Imagine a hospital where one healthy person could be sacrificed to save 5 others with failing organs. Utilitarian logic might say it's the right call. 1 dies, 5 live. The numbers are clear, but something inside you resists. Because the moment we start reducing human lives to equations, we lose something. We lose dignity. We lose autonomy. We lose the sacredness of the individual. And yet, we already live in a world built on utilitarian logic. Every government decision, every cost-benefit analysis, every war, every policy weighs lives against lives. Who gets helped? Who gets left behind? And even in our own lives, we make those trades. Time for money, safety for freedom, truth for comfort. Utilitarianism doesn't tell you what's right. It just tells you to do the math. And sometimes that math feels cold, heartless. Sometimes it tells you to sacrifice the few to save the many. But who decides who the few are? Who measures happiness? Who defines suffering? Utilitarianism forces us to look at morality not as a set of commands, but as a constant balancing act. And it demands something brutal. Honesty. Honesty about the cost of our comfort, about the price of our choices, about the people we hurt to help others. So ask yourself, if a lie saved 100 lives, would you tell it? If silence spared 1,000 people pain, would you stay quiet? If one life had to be ended to preserve 10 others, would you pull the trigger? Utilitarianism doesn't give easy answers. It forces you to carry the weight of your decision. It says, the world is not clean. And that morality, true morality, isn't about staying pure. It's about facing impossible choices and living with the consequences. Nihilism. Nihilism is the belief that nothing matters. Not your name, not your future, not your suffering, your victories, your dreams, or your legacy. It's the stripping away of all illusions until you're left with the bare bones of existence, cold, indifferent, and empty. No grand meaning, no cosmic purpose, no final reward, just atoms colliding in the dark. And yet we live as if our choices matter. We chase goals, we tell stories, we cry over failure and celebrate love. But nihilism stares straight through all of it. It says your pain doesn't echo, your joy doesn't ripple. The universe doesn't care that you were ever here. And one day, neither will anyone else. In 1,000 years, no one will remember your name. In 10,000, your species may not even exist. And in 1 billion, the earth itself will be ash. Everything ends. Everything fades. So why do anything at all? That's the question nihilism forces you to face. If life has no inherent meaning, why keep going? Why wake up? Why try? Some crumble under that weight. They feel paralyzed, hollow, like the ground has disappeared beneath them. But others see something else. Freedom. Because if there is no objective meaning, then you are free to create your own. You don't have to live by someone else's rules. You don't have to chase a dream that was handed to you. You can build a purpose from nothing, not because the universe demands it, but because you do. And that's where nihilism becomes a mirror. It reflects back what you really are when the noise falls away. Are you just avoiding despair? Or are you bold enough to shape meaning in a world that offers none? Most people never ask these questions. They stay distracted, comfortable. But nihilism doesn't let you look away. It asks, if nothing truly matters, what will you do anyway? What would you fight for, knowing the battle will one day be forgotten? What would you create, knowing time will erase it? And what kind of person would you become? Not because anyone's watching, but because that's who you choose to be in the void. That's the dark gift of nihilism. It doesn't take meaning from you. It dares you to make your own. Categorical imperative. The categorical imperative is not a suggestion. It's not advice. It's a command. One that comes not from a god or a law or a culture, but from reason itself. Immanuel Kant believed that true morality couldn't be based on feelings, outcomes, or consequences. Because those change, they bend, they lie. So he built something that doesn't, an unbreakable law, a rule that applies to everyone, always, no matter the situation. And it's simple to say, but brutal to follow. Act only according to that principle by which you could will that it become a universal law. In other words, if you wouldn't want everyone else doing it, don't do it yourself. If you lie, imagine a world where everyone lies. If you steal, imagine a world where stealing is normal. Could that world function? Would it make sense? If not, your action is immoral. No exceptions. And that's what makes the categorical imperative terrifying. It doesn't care about your reasons. It doesn't care if your lie saved someone. It doesn't care if your theft fed your family. Because once you break the rule for yourself, you must allow it for all. There are no loopholes, no personal justifications, and no hiding. The categorical imperative stares you in the face and asks, what if everyone lived like you? Could the world survive? Would it be just? Would it be human? Most people don't live like this. Most people make exceptions. For themselves. For their friends. For their tribe. They lie when it feels right. They cheat when it helps. They cut corners and call it survival. But Kant says that kind of morality is fake. It's selfish. It's weak. Because real ethics isn't about doing what works. It's about doing what's right. Even when it hurts. Even when no one's watching. Even when it costs you everything. And that's what the categorical imperative demands. A kind of moral clarity so sharp, it cuts through all excuses. So the next time you face a choice, ask yourself, what would happen if everyone did what I'm about to do? Would I still say it's okay? Would I still feel proud? Or would the world start to rot under the weight of my actions? The categorical imperative doesn't want your comfort. It wants your conscience. Not just to act good, but to be good. Always. Because anything less isn't morality at all. Tabula Rasa. Tabula Rasa means blank slate. The idea that you are born with nothing. No instincts, no knowledge, no built-in ideas. Just pure potential. A mind untouched by experience. A canvas waiting to be written on by the world. John Locke believed it. That every thought, belief, and identity you carry is the result of what you've seen, heard, touched, and lived. That you are not born knowing who you are. You become who you are. And at first that sounds beautiful. You are not doomed by blood, not chained to destiny. You are free to become anything. But look closer, and it becomes something more unsettling. Because if you start as nothing, then everything you are was shaped by things you didn't choose. Your language, your values, your fears, your culture, even the way you think was handed to you by the world. If you were born in another time, another country, another body, you'd be someone completely different. So who are you really? If all you are is a reflection of your experiences, is there anything solid underneath? Or are you just layers of memory, pressed together by time? Tabula Rasa strips away the illusion of a fixed self. It says you are not finished, not permanent, not final. You are becoming, always. But it also forces a question. If you're a blank slate at birth, who's been holding the pen? Who shaped your beliefs before you even knew you had them? Was it your parents, teachers, society? Were they writing truth, or just passing down their own illusions? Because if you were written into, then maybe you can rewrite, maybe you can erase, maybe you can choose. That's the power and the burden of Tabula Rasa. It means you are not stuck, but it also means you are responsible for unlearning, for questioning, for breaking patterns you didn't ask for. So ask yourself, how much of what you believe is truly yours? How many of your thoughts were planted there by someone else? How much of your identity is just a script you never wrote? Tabula Rasa says the past shaped you, but it doesn't own you. You are the slate, but now, you're also the writer. Eternal recurrence. Eternal recurrence is the most terrifying question ever posed by the human mind. What if your life, exactly as it is, will repeat forever? Not in fragments, not in dreams, but exactly as it is. Every breath, every heartbeat, every mistake, every second, repeating endlessly across eternity with no escape. You will be born again to the same parents, make the same decisions, feel the same heartbreaks, and die the exact same death, over and over, forever. Imagine it. Every joy, every shame, every regret, every time you stayed silent when you should have spoken, every moment you wasted hoping tomorrow would fix what you ignored today. You'd live it all again. The highs would return, but so would the lows. And this isn't a metaphor. This isn't poetic. This is the ultimate test. Nietzsche didn't offer eternal recurrence as comfort. He offered it as a mirror, a challenge. He asked, if a demon whispered in your ear that your life must be lived over again, in the exact same way, would you fall to your knees in horror? Or would you stand up, proud, and say yes? Yes to every bruise. Yes to every failure. Yes to every boring Tuesday afternoon and lonely night and broken friendship and bitter silence. Could you love your life enough to relive it forever? Not because it's perfect, but because it's yours. That's the weight of eternal recurrence. It doesn't ask how good your life looks. It asks how real it feels. It asks whether you're truly alive, or just existing, waiting for something to change, drifting from moment to moment as if time is infinite and tomorrow is guaranteed. But what if it isn't? What if this is the only version of life you'll ever have, and you have to live it again and again until you finally get it right? Not by changing the story, but by changing the way you live inside it. Eternal recurrence doesn't let you escape. It traps you in the now. It turns every action into a question. Every choice becomes eternal. What you eat, who you love, what you ignore, what you run from. All of it becomes permanent. So what do you do with that weight? Do you run, or do you wake up? Because if you wouldn't relive today again, then why are you living it now? Why are you wasting time waiting for meaning to arrive instead of creating it? The truth is, most people couldn't face the loop, because most people are sleepwalking. Most people live like this version of life doesn't count, like the real thing is still coming. But it's not. This is it. And eternal recurrence throws that truth in your face and asks, if this moment echoed forever, would it be a gift or a curse? And if your answer is curse, then the time to change isn't tomorrow. It's right now. Because if you have to live your life over again, the only way to win is to live it so fully that you wouldn't change a single thing. You'd look the demon in the eye and whisper back, "Do it again." Social contract. The social contract is the invisible agreement that holds civilization together. You never signed it. You never saw it. But you live by it every day. It's the unspoken deal between you and everyone else, a trade. You give up certain freedoms, and in return, you get protection, order, and a place in something bigger than yourself. Hobbes believed that without it, life would be brutal, violent, and short. A war of all against all. In the state of nature, before society, there were no laws, no justice, just survival. But to escape that chaos, people surrendered a piece of their power. They gave authority to a ruler, to a state, to a system, because even flawed control was better than endless fear. And that's where the contract begins. Not with ink, but with fear. Fear of violence, fear of isolation, fear of death. You accept laws, you follow rules, you pay taxes. Not because you love them, but because you know what it would look like if everyone acted only for themselves. But here's where it gets complicated. Rousseau believed that the social contract was supposed to make people free, that by aligning our individual will with the general will, we could create a society where laws don't oppress us, they express us, where obedience isn't submission, it's self-rule. But is that what you see? Or has the contract been broken? Do your leaders truly represent your will? Do your laws reflect your values? Or are you trapped in a system you didn't build, following rules you never chose, protecting institutions that wouldn't protect you back? The social contract only works if both sides hold up their end, if the state protects your rights, your dignity, your humanity. But when power forgets its duty, when the people become tools instead of voices, that contract begins to rot. And when the contract rots, rebellion is not chaos, it's repair. Revolution becomes not the breaking of the contract, but the signing of a new one, a better one. The social contract is not fixed, it's not eternal, it's a living agreement. And it asks you, what are you giving up, and what are you getting in return? Are you truly free, or just well managed? Are you protected, or just controlled? Is your obedience a choice, or a habit? And if the answer leaves you uneasy, then maybe it's time to renegotiate. Because society only works when its people believe the trade is worth it. And if the deal no longer serves you, then the contract isn't sacred. It's just paper waiting to burn. Absurdism. Absurdism begins with a feeling you've probably had before, that quiet moment when everything suddenly feels pointless. You wake up, go through the motions, say the same words, chase the same goals, and then one day you stop and ask, why? Why am I doing any of this? Why does anything matter? And then you look out at the world, and the world stays silent. No answer, no meaning, no grand design, just existence, moving forward, blind and indifferent. That's the absurd, the clash between your desperate need for purpose and a universe that offers none. Albert Camus didn't try to deny that feeling. He leaned into it. He said the absurd isn't something to be solved, it's something to be faced. He wrote that the true philosophical question isn't what is the meaning of life, but whether life is even worth living once you realize it has no meaning. That's the weight of absurdism. It doesn't give you a map, it hands you a mirror, and it asks, what will you do now that the gods are silent, the rules are gone, and the universe has no plan for you? Most people run from that. They invent stories, they chase distractions, they throw themselves into ideology or religion or endless busyness, anything to cover the void. But Camus said that's surrender. That's lying to yourself. The absurd cannot be defeated, but it can be lived with. He gave us the image of Sisyphus, the man cursed to roll a boulder up a hill for eternity. A meaningless task, a cruel fate. But Camus imagines Sisyphus smiling, not because the struggle makes sense, but because he accepts it. He owns it. He turns his suffering into rebellion. That's what absurdism teaches, not despair, but defiance. If life has no built-in meaning, then you're free. Free to create, to choose, to live on your own terms. Not because it will last, not because it will matter forever, but because it matters now. So ask yourself, if nothing is waiting for you at the end, if the universe is silent, would you still climb? Would you still speak, love, build, laugh? Would you still dance even if no one's watching? Absurdism says yes, not because it solves the pain, but because it transforms it into courage, into beauty, into a quiet, stubborn joy that says even in a meaningless world, I will live anyway. Dualism. Dualism is the belief that reality is split into two fundamentally different kinds of substance: mind and body, soul and flesh, thought and matter. It's the idea that you are not just a body, not just a machine made of chemicals and cells, but something more, something separate, something unseen. René Descartes pushed this idea to the center of modern philosophy when he said, "I think, therefore I am." He believed the mind was its own kind of substance, independent from the physical body. You could imagine your body gone, he argued, but not your thoughts, your awareness, yourself. That meant your essence wasn't physical. It couldn't be touched, dissected, or measured. And that's the heart of dualism, that two distinct realities exist side by side. One you can see, one you can't. But here's where it gets strange. If the mind and body are truly separate, how do they interact? How does a thought make your hand move? How does fear speed up your heart? How does sadness make tears? Descartes believed the soul influenced the body through a tiny spot in the brain, the pineal gland. But modern science never found that bridge. No gate, no doorway, just brain signals, firing in silence. And yet, we feel like more than our biology. We feel pain that isn't physical. We dream in symbols. We imagine things that never existed. We speak about souls and spirits, love and meaning, as if those things are real, and not just side effects of neurons. Dualism refuses to let the mystery die. It says consciousness is not just brain activity, that your thoughts are not just noise in a skull, that something deeper might be moving behind the scenes. But that belief comes at a cost, because if mind and body are separate, what happens after death? Does the soul float free, untethered, eternal? Or does it vanish with the brain that carried it? Dualism offers hope, but also doubt, comfort, but also contradiction. It asks you to believe in two realities you can never fully prove. One you touch, one you trust. And in between them, a question that still haunts every philosopher, every scientist, every person who has ever stared into a mirror and asked, what am I really? Just matter? Or something more? Something watching from behind the eyes? Something that thinks and feels and dreams and maybe never dies? Determinism. Determinism is the belief that everything, every action, every thought, every moment, is the inevitable result of what came before it. That your choices aren't really choices. That free will is just an illusion your brain tells itself after the decision has already been made. From the movement of galaxies to the way your hand twitches when you're nervous, everything is caused by something. Every effect has a cause. And if the universe is just a chain of causes stretching endlessly into the past, then your life is just one more link. You think you're choosing, but really, you're unfolding. Like a machine set in motion long before you were born. Your genetics, your upbringing, your trauma, the shows you watched, the people you met, the chemicals in your blood and the patterns in your brain. All of it builds the person you are today. So when you decide, when you choose, when you act, it feels free. But is it? Could you have done anything else really? Or was the choice already made the moment the universe began? Determinism doesn't ask you to believe in fate. It asks you to believe in structure, in consequence, in the terrifying possibility that nothing is random, not even you. And that idea breaks something, because we like to believe we're in control, that we are the author of our story, not just the product of someone else's pen. But determinism wipes that away. It says the villain never truly chose evil. The hero never truly chose good. They just followed the path carved by everything that led up to them. And so did you. But here's where it gets even stranger. If determinism is real, then blame disappears. So does guilt. And maybe even pride. Because if you couldn't have done otherwise, then what's the point of punishment? What's the point of praise? Does justice still matter when no one is truly responsible? Or does that make it matter even more? Determinism doesn't just challenge how you see the world. It challenges how you live in it, how you judge others, how you understand yourself. It dares you to look at your own mind and ask, am I really steering this? Or am I just watching it happen? And if I'm not the driver, then who is? Or maybe there was never a driver at all. The veil of ignorance. The veil of ignorance is one of the most powerful thought experiments in moral philosophy, and it begins with a simple but brutal question. How would you design the world if you didn't know who you were going to be in it? Imagine a curtain drawn between you and your identity. Behind it, you know nothing. Not your gender, not your race, not your religion, your wealth, your health, your intelligence, or your family. You don't know if you'll be rich or poor, loved or hated, born into comfort, or dropped into suffering. And with that total ignorance, you are asked to create the rules of society. Now tell me, would you still allow poverty if you might wake up on the other side of it? Would you still make education a privilege if you might end up without access to it? Would you build a system that protects power if you had no idea whether you'd hold any? That's the veil of ignorance. John Rawls used it to build a theory of justice that doesn't start from greed, fear, or self-interest, but from fairness. Because when you strip away who you are, what's left is the question, what's fair for everyone, not just for me? And that's where things get uncomfortable. Because most people build their sense of justice after the fact, after they've seen their role, after they've benefited from the system. They defend inequality when it works in their favor. They call it merit. They call it natural. But behind the veil, there's no favoritism, no assumptions, only risk. Rawls believed that if people were truly rational, they'd build a world where the worst possible life is still a decent one, because no one would gamble with their future if they had no control over where they land. And yet, that's the gamble we all make, without ever agreeing to it. You didn't choose your starting point. You didn't choose your body, your parents, your country. You just woke up inside it, and now you're told to play the game. But what if the game is rigged? What if the rules only feel fair to the ones already winning? The veil of ignorance asks you to step outside yourself, to build not for who you are, but for who you might have been. And that's where justice begins, not in advantage, but in empathy, not in power, but in humility. So ask yourself, if you had to wake up tomorrow as a stranger, would you still defend the world exactly as it is? Or would you rewrite the rules and finally make them fair? The Trolley Problem. The Trolley Problem is one of the most famous moral dilemmas ever imagined. A simple scenario that rips open everything you thought you knew about right and wrong. A runaway trolley is speeding down a track. Ahead, 5 people are tied to the rails. They will die if nothing changes, but you're standing beside a lever. If you pull it, the trolley will switch tracks, killing one person tied to the other side. That's the choice. Do nothing, and 5 die. Pull the lever, and you kill one to save them. What do? It sounds like a logic puzzle, but it's not. It's a mirror. It reflects your values, your instincts, your hidden ethics. Do you choose action over inaction? Do you value numbers over intent? Do you believe killing one is better than letting 5 die, even if it means becoming the killer? Most people say they'd pull the lever. It seems obvious. 1 death is less than 5. But then the questions start to shift. What if the 1 person is a child? What if the 5 are criminals? What if you know the 1, but not the others? Suddenly the math gets blurry. The morality becomes muddy. And that's the genius of the trolley problem. It's not just about numbers. It's about weight, responsibility, sacrifice. It asks, what does it really mean to do the right thing when every option ends in death? Philosophers have expanded it in brutal ways. What if, instead of pulling a lever, you had to push a man onto the tracks with your own hands to stop the trolley? Same result. 5 live, 1 dies. But now it feels different, more personal, more violent. Why? Because action is no longer distant. It's intimate. And that forces you to confront something darker. Maybe it's not just about saving lives. Maybe it's about keeping your hands clean. Maybe we make moral choices not based on outcomes, but on how guilty we're willing to feel. The trolley problem doesn't solve anything. It tears things open. It shows that morality isn't made of clean answers. It's built on fear, instinct, culture, emotion. It's messy, human. And that's the point. Because in real life, there are no perfect choices. Just imperfect people trying to make decisions they can live with. So ask yourself, if you had the power to save 5 by sacrificing 1, would you do it? And if the answer is yes, could you live with what comes after? The will to power. The will to power isn't about control. It's not about domination or greed. It's something deeper, something primal. Nietzsche called it the fundamental force behind all life. Not survival, not pleasure, but the desire to expand, to overcome, to transform. Every living thing, he believed, carries within it a restless hunger, not just to live, but to rise, to test limits, to reshape the world in its image. You feel it when you push past pain, when you rise from failure, when you refuse to submit to despair. That's not comfort driving you. That's the will to power, the force that doesn't ask for permission, that doesn't wait for meaning to be handed to it. It creates meaning. It imposes it. It takes chaos and carves structure into it, not out of need, but out of strength. Most people don't understand this idea. They reduce it to ego, to ambition, to politics. But Nietzsche meant something more. He saw the will to power not as a human invention, but as the engine of reality itself. The reason stars explode, the reason civilizations rise, the reason you wake up in the morning and try again, even when everything hurts. It's the force that says, I will become more than I am, even in the face of death, especially in the face of death. But it's dangerous, because the will to power can elevate or destroy. It can create art, philosophy, empires. But it can also produce cruelty, arrogance, delusion. It's not good or evil. It's beyond both. And Nietzsche didn't believe in suppressing it. He believed in mastering it, shaping it, owning it. Because when it's left unconscious, it festers. It turns into resentment, into submission disguised as morality, into weakness dressed as virtue. But when it's embraced, when you recognize that your pain, your rage, your hunger can be forged into will, you become dangerous, not to others, but to the small version of yourself that wanted to stay safe, stay silent, stay obedient. The will to power breaks that version. It dares you to evolve. So ask yourself, what are you becoming? Are you climbing towards something or hiding from it? Are you creating or consuming? Are you building a life or waiting to be handed one? The will to power doesn't ask you to be cruel. It asks you to be courageous, to want more, not more things, but more reality, more depth, more responsibility, more truth. Not because life gives it to you, but because you take it, because you say yes to the burden of existence, and then carry it higher than anyone thought possible. Ataraxia. Ataraxia is the ancient word for something we all chase but rarely find, a state of perfect inner stillness. Not joy, not pleasure, not excitement, but peace, deep, untouchable peace. It was the highest goal of the Stoics, the Skeptics, and the Epicureans. A soul that cannot be disturbed. A mind that no longer trembles at the chaos of the world. Imagine that. Imagine being fully awake, fully aware, and yet completely calm, no matter what happens. Praise doesn't inflate you. Insults don't wound you. Fear passes through you like wind through open hands. That's ataraxia. Not the absence of pain, but the absence of disturbance. Life doesn't stop hurting. You just stop being ruled by the hurt. You still feel. You still care. But your peace no longer depends on what's outside you. The storms can rage, but your mind remains still. The Stoics found it through discipline, controlling what you can, letting go of what you can't. The Skeptics found it through doubt, refusing to cling to uncertain truths, and therefore never being shaken by them. And the Epicureans found it through simplicity, avoiding unnecessary desire, because craving leads to pain. Different paths, same destination. Ataraxia. A mind no longer chained to the noise. And that's what makes it so rare, because we live in a world that thrives on disturbance, outrage, desire, comparison. Everything pulling at you, trying to drag your focus away, trying to convince you that peace will come if you just buy this, achieve that, fix everything. But ataraxia doesn't come from fixing the world. It comes from no longer needing it to be fixed. It comes from learning to sit in the silence of your own mind and not flinch. To feel sadness without drowning in it. To hear criticism without collapsing under it. To be with yourself and not be at war. That is real power. So ask yourself, what still disturbs you? What shakes your calm? What lie are you still clinging to that says peace is somewhere out there, just one more success away? Ataraxia is not out there. It's inside, waiting for you to stop running, waiting for you to choose stillness in a world addicted to noise. And once you taste it, even for a moment, you realize it's not the world that has to change. It's you. The golden mean. The golden mean is the ancient idea that virtue lives not in extremes, but in balance. Aristotle believed that every moral trait, every human strength, lies between two vices, one of excess and one of deficiency. Courage, for example, stands between cowardice and recklessness. Generosity stands between greed and waste. Humility balances between arrogance and self-loathing. And to live well, to live ethically, is to find that delicate middle ground, not just once, but constantly. Because the golden mean isn't a fixed point. It shifts. It depends on who you are, where you are, what the situation demands. Too little confidence, and you never speak. Too much, and you silence everyone else. Too little ambition, and you waste your life. Too much, and you lose your soul. The golden mean demands awareness. It demands self-honesty. It asks you to step back from every reaction, every impulse, and ask, is this too much? Is this too little? Or is this just enough? But in today's world, moderation is radical. We're taught to chase more, feel everything, react instantly, take sides, take pride in going too far. Nuance gets drowned in volume. Balance is mistaken for weakness. Yet the golden mean is not passive. It is not the grey in between black and white. It is the sharp edge that cuts through both. It requires strength to hold the middle. It takes discipline to feel rage, but choose restraint. To feel desire, but choose patience. To feel fear, but act anyway. Not recklessly, not timidly, but with deliberate force. The golden mean isn't about comfort. It's about control, self-mastery, knowing when to stop and when to go, when to speak and when to listen, when to push and when to let go. So ask yourself, where have you gone too far? Where have you not gone far enough? What virtue are you distorting by taking it to its extreme? The golden mean doesn't ask for perfection. It asks for attention. To live as if every choice shapes who you are. To find the center not by standing still, but by returning to it over and over, no matter how many times the world pulls you off course. In a culture of extremes, balance is not boring. It is revolutionary. And it is the only place where peace and power can truly exist at the same time. Panpsychism. Panpsychism is the ancient, unsettling idea that consciousness isn't rare. It's everywhere. Not just in humans, not just in animals, but in everything. In stones, in rivers, in stars, in atoms. That the very fabric of reality is tinged with mind. Not full awareness, not complex thought, but some spark, some sliver of experience, a faint flicker of being, even in what we call lifeless matter. And at first it sounds absurd. How could a rock feel anything? How could a particle have perspective? But panpsychism doesn't claim that everything thinks. It claims that everything participates in experience, however small. That consciousness is not something added later in evolution, but something built into the structure of the universe from the start. Just like mass, just like charge. It says we've been looking at the world backwards, that instead of asking how unconscious matter gives rise to mind, we should ask why we ever assumed mind was separate from matter to begin with. Because the truth is, we don't know how consciousness arises. We know what brains do. We know how neurons fire. But that spark, that flicker, that I, we don't know where it comes from. There's no equation for it, no measurement, no proof that turning matter into complexity gives birth to a soul. And panpsychism offers a strange solution. Maybe that spark never had to be created. Maybe it was always there. Maybe consciousness didn't emerge from dead matter. Maybe matter was never dead. Philosophers like Galen Strawson argue that materialism has failed to explain the mind, that dualism splits the world in two, but panpsychism threads them together. It says the universe is not built of cold, silent stuff, but of experience, woven into every level. But that idea carries a cost, because if everything is conscious, even dimly, even faintly, then the line between subject and object begins to blur. Then you can no longer say the world is yours to dominate, to carve, to exploit. You are not separate from it. You are a node in the same field, a ripple in the same stream. And maybe that stream is awake in ways we can't yet imagine. So ask yourself, what if consciousness didn't begin with you? What if it's what the cosmos is made of? What if the silence of the universe isn't silence at all, but a voice you haven't yet learned how to hear? Logotherapy. Logotherapy begins with a truth most people spend their whole lives trying to avoid. You can survive without happiness, but you cannot survive without meaning. Viktor Frankl created it not in a classroom, but in a concentration camp. Surrounded by death, starvation, and dehumanization, he watched people fall apart, and others hold on. Not because of comfort, not because of pleasure, but because of purpose. He realized that the ones who endured the unendurable weren't the strongest or the smartest. They were the ones who still had a reason, a future, a why. That's the foundation of logotherapy. The belief that meaning, not happiness, is the core of human existence. You can suffer through anything if you believe it matters, but the moment meaning disappears, even pleasure becomes empty. Even success feels hollow. Happiness fades. Pleasure flickers. But meaning roots itself deep in your soul. Frankl said we don't invent meaning, we discover it. We find it in three places: in work, in love, and in suffering. What you create, who you care for, and how you choose to carry your pain, especially the pain. Because logotherapy doesn't ask how to avoid suffering. It asks what your suffering is for, what it can transform, what it can teach. And that question can save your life. Because when you stop chasing happiness and start chasing meaning, everything shifts. Setbacks become lessons. Loneliness becomes reflection. Even heartbreak becomes a doorway into something deeper. You stop asking, "How do I feel good?" and start asking, "What is this trying to show me?" In a world that tells you to smile more, numb out, stay distracted, logotherapy tells you to dive inward, to stare into the silence and listen for purpose. It's not easy, it's not comfortable, but it's real. So ask yourself, what are you suffering for? What keeps you walking when everything in you wants to stop? What task, what person, what dream still calls your name when the world goes quiet? That is your meaning. That is your anchor. And once you find it, you can endure almost anything, because in the end, happiness comes and goes. But meaning makes the suffering worth it. Scholarly self-knowledge. Scholarly self-knowledge is the belief that deep thought is not a luxury. It's a weapon. A path to self-mastery that begins not with motivation or emotion, but with discipline, with sitting in silence, with reading, questioning, analyzing, and tearing yourself open under the sharp blade of reflection. It's not about information, it's about transformation. Because to study yourself seriously, to observe your fears, your drives, your contradictions, your inherited beliefs, is to declare war on ignorance. Not just ignorance of the world, but of who you are beneath the roles, the masks, the noise. Most people don't think. They react. They live by instinct, shaped by culture, reacting to forces they've never examined. They chase goals they never questioned. They repeat patterns they never saw forming. But scholarly self-knowledge refuses that blindness. It dares you to look in the mirror and ask, what am I really made of? What assumptions rule me? What weaknesses do I dress up as personality? What wounds do I carry that still steer my decisions? This is not soft work. It is ruthless. It demands time. It demands effort. It demands that you replace comfort with clarity. It is journaling when you don't want to, reading when distraction tempts you, thinking when silence feels unbearable. But over time, it builds something unshakable, a mind that doesn't flinch in crisis, a will that doesn't bend to pressure, a person who doesn't lie to themselves just to feel okay. Scholarly self-knowledge is not about self-help. It's about self-respect. It's the belief that your life is worth studying, that your mind is not a mystery to fear, but a system to master. Through philosophy, psychology, history, and reflection, you stop being a passenger in your own story. You become its author. So ask yourself, when was the last time you truly studied your own thoughts? When was the last time you traced your anger to its root? When was the last time you stopped asking what others think of you and started asking what you think of yourself? Deep thought is not weakness. It is strength in its most quiet form. And if you dare to use it, if you commit to knowing yourself not just emotionally but intellectually, you gain something rare: self-mastery. Not over the world, but over the one force that determines everything else: your mind. Theodicy Problem. The problem of theodicy is one of the oldest and most unsettling questions ever asked. If God is all-powerful and God is all good, then why does evil exist? Why do children die in pain? Why do the innocent suffer while the wicked thrive? Why are there earthquakes, plagues, genocides, and endless silence from the heavens? If God could stop it, but doesn't, does that make him cruel? And if he wants to stop it, but can't, does that make him weak? This is the riddle that has haunted philosophers, theologians, and believers for thousands of years. It's not about doubting God's existence. It's about doubting his character, his justice, his love. If a human stood by and let innocent people suffer, we'd call it evil. So why do we call it divine when God does the same? Some say it's all part of a plan, that suffering has meaning, that every tragedy serves a higher purpose. But tell that to the parent who buried their child. Tell that to the victim of war, or abuse, or despair. Others say God gave us free will, and evil is the price of freedom. But does that explain cancer, or earthquakes, or the kind of pain no human ever chose? Some say this world is just a test, a temporary trial before eternal joy. But if that's true, then why create the test at all? Why make a world so brutal that faith itself shatters under the weight of grief? Theodicy doesn't break belief. It sharpens it. It forces you to confront what kind of God you actually believe in. Not the one you were taught to fear. Not the one you sing about in songs. But the one whose silence echoes in every unanswered prayer. Some find comfort in mystery, in the idea that God's ways are beyond human understanding, that what looks like cruelty may, in the eyes of eternity, be compassion. But others can't accept that. They look at suffering and see only randomness, indifference, a universe that offers no explanations. And maybe that's what Theodicy really reveals. Not a solution, but a choice. Between faith and despair. Between hope and honesty. Between a God you trust despite the darkness, or a world you must face without him. So ask yourself, when evil strikes, do you still believe there's meaning behind it? Or does the silence finally sound like the truth? Solipsist Doubt. Solipsist doubt is the darkest, most isolating idea the mind can touch. That you can't prove anything exists but yourself. Not your friends, not your family, not the world around you. Just your own thoughts, echoing in a room that may not even be real. You say you see a tree, but how do you know the tree is there, and not just a hallucination fed to your mind by something you can't detect? You say you hear voices, but what if every word, every sound, every moment is generated inside your own head? Solipsism doesn't say the world isn't real. It just says you can't ever prove it is. Because everything you've ever known has come through your senses, and your senses can lie. They've lied before. Dreams feel real until you wake up. Delusions feel solid until they collapse. So how do you know this, right now, isn't just another layer of illusion? The truth is, you don't. And no one ever has. Descartes stripped away every belief he had, until only one thing remained: Cogito. Ergo Sum. I think, therefore I am. He couldn't be sure the world existed, but he was sure that something was doing the thinking, that there was at least a mind, experiencing, doubting, questioning. But everything beyond that, a guess, a hope, a gamble. Maybe your memories are false. Maybe the people you love are just simulations. Maybe you're the only mind in existence, dreaming a world so detailed, so convincing, that you forgot you were alone. And that's where solipsism becomes unbearable. Because if no one else exists, then what is love? What is suffering? What is morality? What's the point of anything if the world is just a mirror reflecting yourself back at you? But even that despair, who feels it? You do. You, the observer, the experiencer, the only thing you can't escape. And maybe that's the only answer solipsism gives. That even if everything is a lie, you are the truth. So ask yourself, are you speaking to a machine right now, or just to yourself in another form? Are these words proof of a shared world, or just another thought passing through your mind? You can't know, you never will. And that's the weight of solipsist doubt. Not that nothing exists, but that you can never be sure anything does but you. Leap of faith. The leap of faith begins where reason ends. It's not blind belief. It's belief in the face of silence. Belief in the absence of proof. When the facts fall short, When logic leads you to the edge of a cliff and offers no bridge, the leap of faith asks you to jump anyway, to trust, to commit, to move forward without certainty. Kierkegaard called it the deepest act of courage. Not the courage to fight or to win, but the courage to believe when belief feels impossible. Anyone can follow a path that's lit. Anyone can believe when the evidence is clear. But the leap of faith happens in darkness, when you pray and no one answers, when you hope and the world stays silent, when the thing you love or need or trust is nowhere to be found, but you keep going. That's what makes the leap so terrifying. It doesn't promise reward. It doesn't guarantee truth. It simply demands everything. You step into the unknown, not because you know it's safe, but because staying still is no longer bearable. Faith, in this sense, isn't weakness. It's rebellion against despair, against nihilism, against the cold, mechanical universe that offers no meaning unless you create it. The leap of faith is not just religious. It lives in every artist who paints before they're understood, every lover who opens their heart without knowing if it'll be broken, every person who chooses hope over resignation. It's the act of saying yes to a question that has no answer, not because you're sure, but because you refuse to stop searching. So ask yourself, what are you waiting for proof of? What truth are you holding at arm's length because the evidence isn't perfect, the outcome isn't guaranteed, the risk isn't safe? The leap of faith says, take it anyway, not because you're certain, but because some things are worth choosing even when you don't know. Especially when you don't know. Because in that leap, in that terrifying moment between doubt and decision, you meet the part of yourself that logic will never touch. The part that believes, the part that moves, the part that dares. Atomic swerve. The atomic swerve is one of the oldest and most powerful ideas hiding in ancient philosophy. A quiet rebellion built into the fabric of the universe. It comes from Lucretius, a Roman poet who lived over 2,000 years ago, and it begins not with people or gods, but with atoms, tiny, invisible building blocks, falling endlessly through the void in perfectly straight lines. Predictable, ordered, lifeless. If they always followed those lines, nothing would ever change. No collisions, no reactions, no creation, just silence. But Lucretius believed something saved the universe from that fate. A swerve, a random, spontaneous, uncaused deviation in the path of an atom. A sudden shift that breaks the pattern. No reason, no trigger, just movement off course. And from that single atomic rebellion, everything else became possible. Chaos, complexity, life, love, choice. The entire story of existence began with a swerve. And here's where it gets personal. Because you are made of those atoms. You are their echo, their legacy. And if they can break the laws of perfect motion, so can you. You can shift. You can bend. You can wake up one day and decide that your past no longer owns you. That your pain is not permanent. That your patterns are not prisons. People talk like their life is set, like who they are is carved in stone. But the swerve says otherwise. The swerve says even the smallest deviation can change everything. Not with a grand speech, not with a perfect plan, just with a moment. One act of courage, one unexpected no, one whispered yes when you were supposed to stay silent. You don't need to escape your life. You just need to interrupt it. Interrupt the spiral, interrupt the loop. That's the beauty of the swerve. It's not massive, it's microscopic, but it's enough. Enough to disrupt the old story and start a new one. Because every life is a chain of events, but not every chain is locked, and not every law is final. Even nature itself, cold, mechanical, mathematical, still left space for freedom, for spontaneity, for the unknown. So what about you? Where have you been falling in a straight line, hoping something will stop you? What would it look like to shift? Just slightly? Not to run, Not to burn it all down, but to turn. Quietly. Suddenly. Without apology. The atomic swerve isn't just a theory. It's permission. To change, to choose, to break the rules written by your past. Because if even atoms can disobey the universe, you can disobey your story. Brain-in-Vat. The Brain-in-Vat thought experiment begins with a terrifying possibility. You might not be who you think you are. You might not even be human. You might just be a brain, suspended in fluid, plugged into wires, fed electrical signals by a machine so perfectly designed that everything you see, hear, touch, taste, and remember is a simulation. A lie. The sky, fake. The people you love, projections. Your entire life, just a program playing on repeat inside a container in some cold laboratory. And the worst part, you'd never know. Because everything you use to test reality, your eyes, your ears, your thoughts, would already be part of the illusion. Every time you feel certain the world is real, that feeling itself could be planted, manufactured, designed to keep you from ever asking the question, what am I, really? Descartes faced a similar problem centuries before this experiment was imagined. He wondered whether an evil demon could be feeding him a false reality. Today, we swap the demon for a computer, but the fear stays the same. If your mind can be fooled perfectly, then what can you trust? Philosophers call this radical skepticism, doubting everything except the fact that you are doubting. You think, you feel, you experience. That much is real. But the world? Unprovable. And suddenly, solipsism isn't just a theory. It's your new home. You become a prisoner inside your own thoughts. And every voice you hear, including this one, might just be another echo inside your tank. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe the Brain-in-Vat isn't meant to convince you the world is fake. Maybe it's meant to remind you how fragile your certainty is. How easy it is to mistake sensation for truth. How dependent you are on systems you don't control. And once you realize that, the question shifts. Not is this real, but what would I do if it isn't? Would you live any differently if this world were simulated? Would your love mean less? Would your suffering mean nothing? Would kindness lose its weight just because it wasn't happening on real soil? Or would meaning survive the illusion? Would your choices still matter, especially if you were the only conscious thing inside the lie? The Brain-in-Vat doesn't answer those questions. It leaves you staring at the walls of your own mind, wondering whether they're solid or just painted on. Ikigai Purpose. Ikigai is a Japanese word with no perfect translation, but one unforgettable meaning: a reason to live. Not just to survive, not just to exist, but to wake up with direction, with clarity, with quiet joy. It's the intersection of four forces: what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. Passion, mission, vocation, and profession. When they align, something powerful happens. You stop drifting. You stop chasing. You start living from the center of yourself, and everything begins to make sense. Ikigai isn't just a goal. It's not something you cross off a list. It's a practice, a way of life. It doesn't demand greatness. It demands honesty, self-reflection, patience. Because finding your Ikigai means asking hard questions. What makes you lose track of time? What task would you do even if no one paid you? What problem in the world makes you angry enough to want to fix it? What skills do you quietly carry that others overlook? Most people never ask these things. They settle. They chase money without meaning, or passion without purpose, or skill without love. And they wonder why the work drains them, why the days blur, why everything feels just a little bit off. But Ikigai doesn't come from luck. It comes from alignment, from putting the pieces together until your life feels like yours. It's not about escaping the world. It's about engaging with it, fully, authentically, from the part of you that isn't pretending, the part of you that remembers why you started. And once you find it, you don't need motivation. You don't need permission. You just wake up and move forward. Not because you have to, but because you want to. That's the difference between a life you endure and a life you inhabit. So ask yourself, where do your gifts meet the world's needs? Where does your joy meet your effort? What would you keep doing even if no one was watching? Ikigai isn't loud. It doesn't shout. But once you hear it, it never fully goes away. It becomes the quiet compass inside you. A reason not just to live, but to love living. Incompleteness loophole. The incompleteness loophole is the strange, silent crack at the center of logic itself. The idea that some truths can never be proven, yet they remain true. It comes from Kurt Gödel, one of the most brilliant mathematicians in history, who shattered the illusion that reason could explain everything. His incompleteness theorems didn't just apply to numbers. They rewired the boundaries of certainty. He proved that in any logical system complex enough to describe basic arithmetic, there will always be statements that are true, but cannot be proven within that system. Always, no matter how advanced, no matter how precise. There will always be truth living outside the reach of proof. And that changes everything. Because it means logic has a ceiling. It means the mind, no matter how sharp, will eventually meet a wall it cannot climb. Not because the answer isn't there, but because the rules won't allow it to be found. And if that's true in math, the purest language we have, what does that say about everything else? About love, about beauty, about consciousness, meaning, existence. Maybe some things are real, but forever unreachable. Maybe not everything true fits inside a sentence. Maybe not every answer can be forced out with force. The incompleteness loophole breaks the fantasy that if we just think hard enough, long enough, we'll finally understand it all. It tells us there will always be mysteries we can feel, but not solve, truths we can sense, but never prove. And maybe that's not a failure. Maybe that's a feature. Because the most meaningful parts of life aren't logical. You can't prove why a sunset moves you, why you love someone, why you get up after breaking. But it's still true, still real, still burning in the space where reason stops and something deeper begins. So ask yourself, what do you know without needing evidence? What truth lives in you that no theorem can touch? Not blind faith, not wishful thinking, but something undeniable, even if you can't explain it. The incompleteness loophole says there's more to reality than we'll ever define. And maybe that's where wonder begins. Not in what we understand, but in what we'll never quite grasp. Quietism. Quietism is the radical belief that the deepest wisdom comes not from action, but from stillness. That instead of fighting, chasing, fixing, or striving, the soul finds peace by letting go. Letting go of effort. Letting go of judgment. Letting go of the endless noise that tells you must do something to be someone. To a quietist, the world is chaos, but your mind doesn't have to be. Truth doesn't scream, it whispers. And if you want to hear it, you must become still enough to listen. Quietism isn't passivity. It's not apathy. It's not surrendering to despair. It's surrendering the illusion of control. The idea that you can force reality to obey your will. That every problem must be solved. That every storm needs your intervention. Instead, it invites you to become the eye of the storm, to sit in calm awareness while the world spins around you. To trust that clarity comes not from trying harder, but from resisting less. From letting thoughts pass like clouds, letting pain come and go without naming it, letting existence unfold without needing to shape it. This philosophy appears across centuries and cultures, from Taoism to Stoicism to early Christian mystics, all of them pointing to the same truth, that the frantic mind cannot see clearly, and that peace is not earned, it is revealed. in silence, in detachment, in quiet watching. But this path is not easy. It demands the hardest thing of all, to stop reacting, to sit in discomfort without reaching for a fix, to face your inner world without trying to dominate it. In a culture obsessed with movement, ambition, and noise, Quietism is rebellion. It says maybe the most courageous thing you can do is not act, not speak, not interfere, just be. So ask yourself, when was the last time you were truly still? When was the last time you stopped solving and just observed? Could it be that the clarity you're chasing has been waiting for you in silence this whole time? Quietism doesn't promise answers, but it offers space, and sometimes space is all the soul needs to heal. Antifragility. Antifragility is not resilience. It's not about surviving chaos. It's about thriving in it. The anti-fragile is not what endures stress. It's what gets stronger because of it. Pressure, disorder, volatility. These aren't threats. They're fuel. Where the fragile breaks and the robust resists, the anti-fragile adapts, sharpens, evolves. The more you shake it, the more it grows. This concept, coined by Nassim Nicholas Taleb, flips the way we think about weakness and strength. Most systems we build, governments, economies, even bodies, are designed to be stable. But stability is deceptive. It hides the cracks that stress reveals. And when the unexpected hits, the stable collapses. The anti-fragile, on the other hand, needs disorder. It wants surprise. Like muscle, it only grows through tension. Like innovation, it only sparks through failure. Like wisdom, it only deepens through pain. Antifragility teaches that avoiding discomfort weakens you, that shielding yourself from loss dulls your instincts, that playing it safe is the most dangerous thing you can do. True strength is built from exposure, from risk, from uncertainty, from the unpredictable blows life throws without warning. It means embracing challenge not as a threat, but as a test, as a gift. The anti-fragile life isn't reckless, it's intentional. It doesn't seek chaos, but it knows how to dance with it. So ask yourself, are you building a life that crumbles under stress, or one that sharpens with every setback? Do you shrink from volatility, or absorb it? The world won't stop breaking. The storm won't hold back. But maybe that's not a curse. Maybe that's the training ground. Because the point isn't to become untouchable, it's to become unshatterable, to turn pressure into growth, to greet the unexpected with a quiet grin. Because what breaks others builds you. That's anti-fragility. And in a world of glass minds and paper souls, it's the edge that keeps you alive. Hauntology. Hauntology is the quiet horror that time never really moves forward, that the past, no matter how buried, seeps into the present like fog through a cracked window. It's the idea that we are not just living our own moment, but surrounded by ghosts, cultural, emotional, psychological, that refuse to die. The term comes from Jacques Derrida, who used it to describe how Marxism lingered even after its collapse, like a ghost that refused to leave history's stage. But hauntology has evolved into something deeper. It's not about political ideology. It's about memory, about futures that never arrived, about dreams we were promised that quietly dissolved without explanation. You feel it in the quiet dread of lost potential, in the soft ache of music that sounds like something you can't quite name, in the way we recycle aesthetics from the past, vaporwave, retrofuturism, analog textures, not because we're nostalgic, but because we have nothing new to replace them with. We're stuck in a loop. Progress has stalled. The future used to be a direction. Now it's a remix, a ghost of itself. Hauntology whispers that our culture is living in a state of mourning. Mourning for a future that was imagined in the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s. Utopias of flying cars, freedom, connection, meaning. And instead, We got algorithms, loneliness, and a digital world that never quite feels real. We scroll endlessly through content designed to mimic the feeling of life without ever giving us life. We chase moments that feel like echoes. And the scariest part, we don't know how to stop. Hauntology isn't about literal ghosts. It's about the emotional architecture of collapse. The way old dreams cling to us, replaying themselves like unfinished symphonies. The way the present is shaped more by what used to be possible than what is. The world we move through is full of ruins we don't recognize. Songs that hurt for no reason. Images that sting with the weight of something missing. And we don't fix it. We aestheticize it. Package it. Sell it back to ourselves. As if admitting the absence is easier than creating something new. So ask yourself, what promises did the world break for you? What future were you quietly building your heart around that never came? And what if the reason you feel stuck is because you're walking through a haunted timeline, one where the ghosts of what could have been are louder than the voice of what is? Hauntology isn't fiction. It's the mood of a generation, not screaming, but humming. Not dead, but not alive. A future that haunts the present. A past that never stopped bleeding forward. A loop we haven't learned how to break. Interpassivity. Interpassivity is the strange feeling that something or someone is enjoying, suffering, acting, or thinking on your behalf. That a part of you has been outsourced, delegated, performed by another, so you don't have to feel it yourself. It's not the absence of engagement, it's the illusion of it. Watching a laugh track and feeling like you've laughed. Buying a book and placing it on the shelf, convinced you've absorbed its wisdom without ever opening it. Clicking like on a cause you barely understand and walking away satisfied, as if you've made a difference. The philosopher Robert Fowler coined the term, but it was Slavoj Žižek who pushed it into the spotlight. They both saw something eerie in modern life, a passive consumption of active meaning, a performance of reaction, where the object feels for you, acts for you, cries for you. So you don't have to. You don't read the sacred text. You just place it on the altar. You don't confront the feeling. You just watch a character on screen fall apart in your place, and suddenly you feel emotionally cleansed. But are you? Interpassivity reveals the way modern systems numb us by performing our roles for us and then selling us the illusion of participation. We don't vote with impact. We vote with identity. We don't fight for truth. We consume it in fragments, tailored for our echo chamber. And beneath it all, something deeper begins to fade. Responsibility, agency, the sharp pain of truly caring. This isn't just about entertainment. It's about your inner world slowly being subcontracted to systems designed to mimic thought, feeling, and action, without the weight. So ask yourself, when was the last time you truly suffered for something real, not just watched it unfold? When was the last time you sat in the tension without outsourcing it to art, social media, or someone else's outrage? Interpassivity is comfort without risk, passion without pain, reflection without change. And the more we let it take hold, the more we drift into a life observed, not lived. A performance of presence, while the core of us sleeps quietly beneath the surface. Philosophical pessimism. Philosophical pessimism isn't about being sad. It's not a mood or a phase. It's a worldview, a brutal, unflinching belief that suffering outweighs joy, that existence itself carries more pain than meaning, and that optimism is often just a lie we tell ourselves to keep going. It's the quiet scream beneath every forced smile. Thinkers like Schopenhauer, Cioran, and Leopardi didn't try to sugarcoat life. They stared directly into its rawness and asked the questions most people are too afraid to whisper. Why are we here, if only to decay? Why does desire burn forever, only to be extinguished by disappointment, or worse, by fulfillment that leaves us hollow? What kind of world is this, where everything we love dies, and everything we build crumbles. To the pessimist, hope is not a virtue. It's a narcotic, a sedative that numbs us to reality. We chase pleasure, but it fades. We seek meaning, but it slips through our fingers. We fight for progress, but time laughs at our achievements. Even joy, when it comes, carries the shadow of its own ending. So what's the point? Philosophical pessimism doesn't always answer. It doesn't offer salvation. It strips away illusions and leaves you staring at the truth. And in that silence, there's something honest, something freeing. Because when you stop expecting the world to make sense, you stop being betrayed by it. When you stop clinging to the fantasy that life owes you happiness, you begin to see clearly. Maybe peace doesn't come from pretending things are good. Maybe it comes from accepting they're not, and choosing to live anyway. Choosing to create, to love, to reflect, not in spite of the darkness, but in full awareness of it. So ask yourself, what if the truth is bleak? Could you still find beauty in it? Could you still choose dignity in a world that offers no reward? Philosophical pessimism doesn't promise a better life, but it dares you to live fully in a broken one. And sometimes, that kind of honesty is the only form of strength that matters. Enactivism. Enactivism challenges everything you think you know about the mind. It says your thoughts aren't locked inside your head. Your consciousness isn't trapped in your skull like a pilot behind a screen. Instead, your mind emerges from your interaction with the world. You become conscious through movement, perception, embodiment. You think with your body. You understand with your hands, your senses, your environment. The mind is not software running on a brain. It's a process, a dance between you and the world around you. Enactivism says cognition isn't passive. You don't sit back and absorb reality like a camera. You enact it. You bring it forth through your engagement. A tree is not just a tree. It becomes what it is through how you see it, climb it, fear it, name it. Reality isn't fixed. It's shaped by your participation in it. Every choice, every step, every glance constructs the world you live in. And this flips everything. You're not a separate observer of existence. You co-create it. Enactivism dissolves the line between subject and object, between inner and outer. It says, you are not a brain in a vat. You are a body in a world. Thinking doesn't begin when you sit still. It begins when you move, when you feel, when you act. And in this view, even knowledge itself becomes alive. Learning isn't about uploading facts. It's about experience, action, presence. Enactivism doesn't just describe how we think. It redefines what it means to be. So ask yourself, how much of your world are you creating just by interacting with it? What changes when you realize that the boundary between you and everything else might not be as real as you thought? This isn't just philosophy. It's a mirror, a reminder that your consciousness is not a prison. It's a bridge, a performance, a lived, breathing phenomenon. And it doesn't wait for thought to begin. It begins the moment you do. Epiphenomenalism. Epiphenomenalism is the unsettling theory that your thoughts, your feelings, your conscious experience, they don't cause anything. They're just byproducts, shadows, echoes of brain activity that feels meaningful but doesn't actually move the world. According to this view, your mind is like steam rising from a train engine. It's there, it's real, but it's not driving anything. The real power lies beneath, in the mechanical processes of neurons firing, chemicals shifting, signals sparking in silence. You think you make choices. You feel love, fear, pain, joy. But if epiphenomenalism is right, those experiences don't shape your actions. They follow them. Like light from a star, arriving long after the explosion. Your brain makes the decision, your body acts, and then your consciousness shows up too late, just in time to watch. This doesn't mean you're a robot. It means the part of you that feels like a self, the narrator, the observer, the dreamer, is not in control. It's commentary, not command. This theory rattles everything we believe about free will, about agency, about being human. Because if your conscious mind is just a spectator, then who are you, really? A witness? A ghost? A decoration hung on top of a meat machine built by evolution? Epiphenomenalism doesn't deny consciousness, it just strips it of power. And yet, if your thoughts don't cause anything, why are you aware of them at all? Why would the universe evolve minds that feel without function? Is consciousness just an accident? A brilliant but useless side effect? Or is there something deeper we're missing? Something we can't yet measure or prove? So ask yourself, what if your most vivid inner life is real, but irrelevant? Would you still value it? Would you still be you? Epiphenomenalism is not a comfortable idea, but it might be one of the most honest reflections of how little we truly understand the mind that dares to question itself. Deep ecology. Deep ecology isn't just environmentalism, it's a radical shift in how we see ourselves. It says nature doesn't exist to serve us, it exists with us. Or rather, we exist within it. You are not above the earth. You are not separate from the forest, the ocean, the wind. You're just one strand in a vast, intricate web. And this web has no center, no hierarchy, no chosen species. Deep ecology rejects the human-centered worldview we've clung to for centuries. The idea that nature is a resource, a backdrop, a tool for our comfort. Instead, it calls for something ancient and humbling. Reverence. A recognition that the tree is not just lumber. The wolf is not just danger. The river is not just water. They have value beyond our use for them. Intrinsic worth. Not because they help us, but because they are. This philosophy challenges everything our society is built on. Growth at any cost. Convenience over connection. Dominance over balance. It says our crisis isn't just ecological, it's spiritual. We've lost the ability to feel kinship with the world we depend on. And now, that world is warning us. Melting, burning, dying. But deep ecology doesn't offer a quick fix. It demands transformation, of values, of identity. It asks you to stop thinking like a consumer and start thinking like a participant, like a creature among creatures, like a voice in a choir older than memory. So ask yourself, who would you be if you remembered you belonged to the earth, not the other way around? What would change if you saw a mountain not as real estate, but as a living ancestor? Deep ecology whispers that healing doesn't begin with technology or policy. It begins with perception, with the courage to feel small in the face of something vast and sacred. Because maybe salvation doesn't come from conquering nature, but from returning to it, quietly, gently, as one of its own. As one. Fallibilism. Fallibilism is the quiet acceptance that you might be wrong. About anything. About everything. Even the things you believe with your whole heart. Even the things that feel obvious, sacred, untouchable. Fallibilism doesn't say truth doesn't exist. It says your grasp of it is always incomplete. That every belief, no matter how solid, is built on shifting ground. And that's not weakness. That's wisdom. At its core, fallibilism is humility in the face of the infinite. It's the recognition that knowledge isn't a fortress. It's a campfire, lit in the dark, surrounded by unknowns. The more you learn, the more you see how much you don't know. And that space, that silence beyond your understanding, is where fallibilism lives. It warns against certainty, against arrogance disguised as clarity. Because the moment you know you're right, you stop listening. You stop questioning. You stop growing. Fallibilism keeps the door open. It invites doubt, not as an enemy, but as a teacher. It says, "This is what I believe, for now." And that's powerful, because when you accept that you might be wrong, you're free. Free to learn, free to evolve, free to let go of ideas that no longer serve you. Most people crave certainty. It feels safe, solid. But fallibilism dares you to stand on a foundation that's always moving, to build wisdom on uncertainty. And in a world drowning in overconfidence, that's not just rare, it's revolutionary. So ask yourself, what do you believe that you've never questioned? What would happen if you did? What would you gain by admitting, I don't know? Fallibilism isn't about doubt for doubt's sake. It's about staying awake, staying curious, staying human. Because the truth doesn't need you to own it. It just needs you to keep reaching for it, even if you never quite touch it.